I gave it right back to him.
I mean, listen, in fairness, that is somebody else's 3D model that I just printed and painted, so I can take like a tiny bit of the credit for that, but
You gave the whole secret away, so now you're
I
okay
know
again.
that's the whole secret. It's just lipstick on a pig, all of my terrain is, so
Yeah, and apparently I was muted too, so that didn't help anything. So everybody was on the. They were starting out good tonight, fellas. I'm telling you what.
Woo.
And I haven't even been
rolled
drinking.
the nat one.
Oh,
Maybe that's
yeah.
the problem.
Maybe that is the problem. Let's see here. Let's restart this. Hey, everybody, we're back at Tavern Talks. I'm here with the world's okayest crafter. And tonight we're going to talk about crafting and about game mastering with terrain and all sorts of other fun stuff. But if this is the first time you've ever been here, make sure if you have questions, drop them in the chat room because that's the way we can have the guest answer them and ourselves if we really feel like it. Anyway, to begin us, we're just going to have you just give your elevator pitch, your 3 to 5 second, who you are, where you can find you, and then we'll jump into some questions because those are always fun.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so I'm Jared. I'm World's Okayest Crafter on mostly Instagram, other dark deep corners of the internet here and there, but I found Instagram is the place to be. So yeah, that's me. I started creating terrain around the same time that I started DMing. Actually, fairly new to the Dungeons and Dragons game, only a couple of years compared to some other very veteran players. But yeah, that's me.
Ooh. I have this conversation all the time, and I love it because there's two different types of dungeon gamers right or D&D gamers right now. You're the other side, which makes it even more fun because I can ask certain questions.
I am the other side. I'm a newbie.
That's
I've been
awesome.
like
I'm
adjacent
with you
to it
on this.
most of my
Okay,
life.
I'm with you. I'm representing the new folks.
The new folks.
Hey, somebody had to breathe life back into it.
Yeah. Well, it brings a different mentality to the game too. You people who have been playing for 20, 30 years, they still bring that wargamer mentality to it because that's how it was created. Um, a lot of people that are joining in the last 5 to 10 have a much more storyteller driven game, and it's very based on the story. I don't think there's a bad thing for either, and I've played both very consistently for a while, and I like both. And I think a blend of both is the best way to do it, but that can be difficult at times, especially when you do things like terrain, because you have to build a map and you have to have all these extra stats. It's great. So to start, we always ask 3 questions here at the tavern. First question is, when did you start? Which you've already told us a couple years ago, so that does answer that first question. Um, Now, what I like to caveat to that question is what got you interested though? So people that are watching this or that will watch this in the future, hopefully when they watch it, they go either they've never played or they've just started playing, and their question is going to be like, how do I get hooked? What was the thing that you play your first game and you go, okay, I need this in my life. Like this is something that I don't need to play once and then kind of throw it aside.
I tend to, I mean, again, I feel like I've been like, it was bound to happen at some point that I'd start playing D&D because I definitely grew up full on and like I love board games. Like I love nerd culture, obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Like from the moment I was old enough to read the books to like when the movies came out, it's my jam through and through.
Speaking my
So it
language.
felt like it was a little bit right. It's shocking. It's I always say it's not really a hot take when I say Lord of the Rings is awesome. Um, so how I really ended up in it is I had a friend well, now who is one of my best friends. Barely knew the guy at all at the time, but he actually just posted on Facebook of like, "Hey, I'm looking to get back into D&D and looking for players." And so of all people, my wife actually saw this and connected and was just like, "Hey, we'll do it." And so my wife and I got to play, and my wife like enjoyed it enough, but she kind of then sailed off into the sunset as far as D&D goes. And I was all in right away. Like I think I had 2 or 3 dice sets already by the time I even played my first game. And I'm like, well, I'm committed now. and we didn't end up finishing the story. Only got a couple sessions in, but it was the Lost Mines of Phandelver was my first
Ooh.
experience with real D&D. And man, we were sitting in his basement. He had music going. He had like a PowerPoint screen, with the map, and it was just immediately, got chills. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my jam through and through. And within months after that, some stuff shifted. We ended up playing in Icewind Dale, which was incredible. Again, unfortunately, didn't get to finish that campaign. That player, my friend, moved a little bit further away, and so kind of left us with this void. And then I decided, hey, I enjoy this. Why not try my hand at DMing? And then here I am, couple years into basically being a full-time DM now, and started crafting terrain shortly thereafter. And so yeah, it didn't take much. I realized very quickly that all of the facets of D&D are definitely right up my alley.
Well, I completely understand that, and the fact that you have to put on the you know the facet of, yeah, I'm kind of the new GM that is always the GM now. It works out that way usually. So
Willingness is definitely like 90% of the battle. I would say though, my group is a little bit unique. I think from what I've learned from the D&D spaces, I actually do have a couple players who DM one shots from time to time. And I think if the need arose, they would step in and become the full-time DM. But honestly, I don't like to give them the option at this point because I like it so darn much. So
that's the way to do it. Do you homebrew 90 most of your stuff, or do you do a
I
blend?
do a little bit of a blend. The setting is homebrew. I run a pirate campaign. It's called the Abyssal Tide.
Ooh.
Basically, I watched Pirates of the Caribbean again, and was like, yeah, that could be fun as D&D. And so kind of dove in, unintended, dove in from there. And so it is a fully homebrew world, but I'll still use like traditional D&D monsters and the pantheon, the traditional D&D gods. And while it's a fully custom map, the region is called the Oceanic Vale.
Okay.
I kind of say, it's, if you sail far enough off the map, eventually you'll make it to the Sword Coast. It's kind of always how I put it, just so, eventually,
If we
if
need
we
to
sail out
branch
of that region,
away, we'll be able to
exactly
have
right.
somewhere
Mm.
to go.
And that way it's all interconnected, which I think is fun. And it still feels familiar. My group we mostly all started playing around the same time with a few people with a little more experience, here and there. Um, so I found with homebrew, like it scratches the itch for me because I love writing lore. It's one other thing to do, one other side of the hobby that you get to create a world and write and do these things. But then it also still feels familiar enough that when people are experienced in D&D, that it's like, all right, I know that god that was just mentioned, or yeah, I know that
Hmm.
monster. So it's not 100% homebrewed,
Yeah, so
but
you
I
don't
found
take
it's
the
worked great for me.
large packs, the way I've always described to game masters is there's two ways to really build your world. You either build small and build out, or you build wide and build in. Um,
Mm,
and you're doing the small to build out, which makes life a lot easier, truthfully, in my opinion, because you're only having to explain and build on things that the players can see and touch in that area as you grow
right,
forward. Um, yeah, pantheons can get weird because like you said, if you start building a pantheon that nobody understands or knows, or and you haven't structured it the right way, then it doesn't feel right. Um, Same with magic, like how magic works, stuff like that. Those are things that are
right.
very known in the high fantasy realm. Um, I am going to recommend something for you since you said you love pirates.
Sure.
And I don't usually plug these, but I'm going to because it's a friend of mine and I feel like it's kind of worth it. There are other RPGs that are strictly around pirates. This one specifically is called Pirate Borg. It's run off the Morkborg
Love
system,
that.
and it is a single entity or is a single person who does everything, everything from writing, artwork, layout, distribution, everything. And
That's awesome.
he's done some incredible stuff with that. But yeah, if pirates are your thing, that's definitely the way to go. Check that one out.
They are definitely my jam. It was one of those things that I was, I ran it past my players when I presented the idea of like, hey, I would love to start DMing more. I think in the meantime, we kind of did some one shots and presented the idea of like, hey, what do we think about doing like a seafaring campaign? And kind of presented of like, you guys would be pirates is my idea, and you kind of fit in the morally gray area since everyone ends up being murder hobos anyway. This way, it's like justified within the story, And I was a little concerned that we would all get burnout on pirates, but then I've realized like 90% of our sessions still end up on land. And I've had them in a dwarven kingdom. They've climbed up a mountain,
Yeah,
fought like
they just got to
a
get
group of
back to the
griffins
ship.
on a
That's all they're
mountaintop.
worried about, getting back to the
Right,
ship.
I know. So it's fun because you really can make it whatever you want it to be. And yeah, there's always that through line of your pirates. You should get back to the sea, get back to your boat. But it's worked really well. I found that if I'm not feeling inspired in the direction of pirates, like if they're inland, I can kind of shift. It's easy enough to kind of mold the story. And, if I see they're really latching onto one thing, then we can explore that further. And if they're not, then we can just move past it, which has been fun. Excited to check out Pirate Borg, though. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Some recommendations for you if you don't know these already, and I'm probably sure you do. But this plays really well with the if you're using the 2024 edition. This plays really well with the Bastion ability, so you can actually make the ship their Bastion.
Yes. Yes.
And then Salt Marsh will have a lot of abilities for the actual ship itself. So
Salt Marsh was one that I bought when I started planning this because I was looking into things, and that was one that I pretty quickly latched onto, mostly for the monsters initially, because they
yeah.
obviously have a lot of
They have the whole
good,
ship mentality in the back of it though, which makes it so you can build your
and
giant
that's
ship out. And yeah,
and
that's
that
really
was
cool.
what I found. That was kind of just like a happy accident almost, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect, which helped a ton. It's one of those things when you start DMing, and like for me, I was still reasonably new to the whole space. um, you don't realize how many facets and things there are that it can get really overwhelming really quickly. So having pre-written things like that, and even some like third-party content and stuff to find and pull from, is just a lifesaver.
Oh yeah, 100%. I did homebrew for the first few years after I gotten back into it when fifth edition came back out. Um, but I've really blended at this point. Like I'm running an Icewind Dale campaign right now that we've been in for over a year now. Um, the One Ring is what we're about to run, so I'm running in Middle Earth, so it's a world that people know and understand.
Yeah.
Um, but just because you're in those settings doesn't mean you have to stick to the rules. That's my favorite part about
And
Dungeons
that's
and Dragons.
and that's my thing too, is it Dungeons and Dragons can truly be whatever you want it to be. I've said multiple times, as long as everybody at your table is under the same understanding and everybody's like on board with it, then like we're good to go. I love the rule of cool as much as anybody, but it's like there's a time and a place for it. And that's what I found is as the DM, oftentimes it's like my rule is final period. I'm always happy to have a conversation with my players of like, hey, like when the 2024 rules came out, for instance, we adopted a lot of those new rules because they made sense. Some were like, we're not sure if we like them. And I go, let's try them for like 2 sessions. Then we can talk about it again. If we realize it's not our jam, then we can just go back. Or if we realize, hey, this is great, then we keep them. And I think that's the beauty of it, is you really can make D&D whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, I recommend people a lot, and now more than ever, to pick up those old second and first edition books and blend
Yeah.
them into your game. Don't worry about the stats of everything, but the lore is so good. Um, and it's weird though because like first edition stuff was still built to the way where you could take on creatures at a normal level and you're not killing one creature at a time. You're killing five at six at a time. So it's like it still
Right.
felt like that very wargame-ish feel, but it was also just an epic fight, right? Like you weren't fighting,
Yeah.
you're going to go up against six dragons. Now, mind you, if any of the dragons hit, you're dead. But you at least are going to take out one or two at the same time, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like now Dungeons and Dragons has kind of moved away to a superhero mentality where you can't really kill a character very easily, unless you're me, because I do it all the time. People get mad at me for it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very true. My my party, I have 6 players, and one is kind of in and out. They had a kid, so justifiably they're taking a little break. Um, but they just hit level 9 a few sessions ago. And my gosh, they are freaking hard to kill. They are beefy. Like,
Yeah.
I can throw a huge, powerful monster at them, and it's still like,
Yeah.
well, that was a fun 2 rounds of combat. Glad I printed and painted that many up,
Yeah. Resource management is your best friend when it comes to high level campaigns.
For
Right off the
sure.
bat, every campaign, once you get to those levels, like 3 to 5 combats before you even let them take a rest is probably your best option, so that you don't feel like you're just, I'm throwing an extra, I'm throwing a CR-15 at them and they're just walking over it. Yes, because they're full powered and they're ready to go.
Yeah,
And
full
you're going to
power
give them
all
a
the time.
rest right after it.
Right.
Yeah, don't do
Which
that.
I would say is maybe my own fault as much as anything. Having them be on a ship just makes it like, well, there's 6 of us, so I mean, 5 of us can go man the boat, and one of us can go rest. And we'll just go in ships.
Yeah.
Or it's like, well, we can just weigh anchor, and we'll roll on random tape. So it is kind of like a built-in fail-safe for long rests, but that's definitely a challenge for many players at a higher level.
Yeah.
Is keeping them
I'd be
honest.
sending pirate ships at them at that moment. I'd be like, no,
Oh,
no,
for
no,
sure.
we're not sleeping tonight, people.
Just give them a dragon turtle.
Yeah, the dragon turtle ripping
Oh,
into the hull of the
right.
ship. Figure
We
this
had a
one out
whole
while I'm
session, right? We had a whole session where they actually encountered deceased ancient dragon turtle that they just thought was an island, and they crawled up onto its back, then realized what it was.
That's
So it was
awesome.
pretty fun. I've realized I really enjoy environmental things to keep them on their toes, whether it's a rogue wave or a thunderstorm or whatever. I found those tools as a DM help me a lot to keep them, even if it's just as simple as to keep them from resting.
Yep. It's
But
one of the funniest stories too you can usually get. Like, everybody roll a dexterity check as a wave hits the back of the side of the boat, and 3 people miss and all 3 fall off the boat, and you're like,
yep.
well, 2 of the guys, and we have 1 still awake and 2 are sleeping downstairs, and I can only reach 1. What's going on? We're in trouble.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right.
Good, yeah.
There's a game that I have that I've been wanting to run, Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, and there's a portion of it that is very sea voyage heavy.
Sure.
So much so that they give you a map of like constellations to travel by.
That's cool.
That's pretty awesome. That is really cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really want to try it out, James.
I get the house back in 2 months. And I have,
but no,
and
so
I've got 2
okay.
more Kickstarters coming in for Dwarven Forge. We'll make this work. I just gotta get some more stuff.
Oh, I know. So okay, so you started a couple years ago as a DM, or well, as a player. Then you became a DM. How did you end up becoming the Okayest Crafter? Like, what was that spark in there?
Yeah. So I like to think I'm like a reasonably creative person where I enjoy working with my hands. I now thankfully have left that career, but I worked in construction for almost a decade. So like I was used to working with my hands and doing, creative adjacent things. And much like many people, I saw probably a video of, Matt Mercer or somebody playing D&D with terrain. And I'm like, well, that's cool. And I'm a very visual person. So like the story I always tell is, a player, we were in Icewind Dale and we're just doing theater of the mind. And the player sitting next to me is like, well, is there a tree? And the DM's like, yeah, probably. And the guy's like, well, can I try to chop it down? And so he ends up chopping it down and it rolls down a hill and crushes like 6 goblins. And I'm like, that's awesome. And then in my mind, I'm like, I never would have thought of that because there's not a tree sitting in front of me to make me think, is there a tree? So it was kind of born from that. And then much like many people who kind of dive into the crafting, I, looked on YouTube, found like Jeremy at Black Magic Craft and, a few others. And I realized, hey, this is, not that complicated at its core and all the materials are pretty cheap. Like I can try this, so I made a few rocks and things and then didn't really have much to do with them because I wasn't running games. So I was like, well, these are cool. And I brought them to, the guy who was DMing at the time. And, we got some use out of them here and there, but we never had a full map. And then, you know, what came first, chicken or the egg? Once I started DMing, then I was like, all right, I now have my own space. I need more. I can make more. Now I can justify it. And so yeah, it just kind of was a snowball that just kind of going. And then I think you hinted at it earlier. Then it's to the point where it's like now I have to have terrain on the table. Like now it's kind of become my thing. My players have become used to it. I've become used to it. So now it's like we will still occasionally, if it's very much out of combat, we'll do theater of the mind, much like anybody. I'm not having a constant shifting, table of stuff. But so is making terrain, and then my wife and other people have kind of encouraged me, like, just share it, post on Instagram, whatever. And so a couple of years ago, my kids got me a mug that says "World's Okayest Dad," and I was like, oh, that's funny, that's clever. And so one day I'm just like, you know what, heck with it. I'm just gonna share a couple pictures, and maybe two, three people will enjoy it. Maybe I'll connect with some people along the way. And so I did. That was a little over a year ago, and then it's just kind of grown from that. Just kept crafting stuff.
Later, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like I said,
That's impressive.
I appreciate it. It's been fun. I still have no real expectations of it.
I think
it's
that's
amazing.
The best
thing to me, like I don't like. I think I would be disappointed if I did. Listen, that's incredible. I'm thankful for every single one of my followers. But it's also that's been in a hobby I love and enjoy, but it's also been like hundreds and hundreds of hours of crafting and setting up tables and painting minis and things. And so it's like if that were the only reason I was doing it is to post and share and hope of getting followers, can't be disappointed. I do it because I love doing it.
Right.
I love making terrain. I love being able to see the look on my players' faces when they turn the corner and see the table and it's full of new things they haven't seen yet. I just like self-indulgently, I just think it's awesome, to have I built my gaming table, which is nothing spectacular, but like it's table to play games on,
Sure.
And then to fill it with terrain that I've made and to be able to tell a story that I wrote, it's pretty cool. So, yeah.
So I'm curious.
So what's been your favorite thing to build?
That's what I was going to ask him, because I see a lot of his stuff out there is like a lot of your stone, a lot of your like dungeons. Is that all done in styrofoam, or are you building it on with 3D modeling at this point, or 3D printing at this point?
Some of my smaller bits are 3D modeled, printed. I do not 3D model myself. It is a skill I would love to eventually learn and dabble in, but not today. But yes, it's predominantly all, blue styrofoam, XPS foam. Yeah, because it's cheap, it's easy to work with, it's easy to cut, it's lightweight. But yeah, it's mostly just, foam, craft paint, and, some elbow grease, basically. But yeah, so I've been able to make some pretty cool things. I have a ruined watchtower, and I think it was one of the pictures I sent over for the promo of this.
Real cool.
I appreciate it. That's probably my favorite, just because it's almost more of a diorama, where I definitely have used it in many games.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very happy with the way that turned out. That is still the thing that I'm kind of like chasing to I want to make something that I feel is cooler than that. And I've made some, cool tables that I feel like flow really well, and have been fun for encounters and environments and things. But I find I'm still, because I'm fairly new to this, I'm still lacking a lot of basics, So oftentimes my crafting time goes to, well, I probably should make, grass covered stackers or hills or, stones or whatever, because those are the things you're going to pull more often, Whereas I think the things that are more fun to make are the more hyper specific things where you're not going to get quite as much use out of.
Yeah.
But those are really fun to do, The problem for me is storage space, because I could make whatever, and I could use it once, and I could put it on the shelf in hopes that, hey, maybe 5 years from now I can use that again in a story. But
there we go. I'm back. Ooh, that was weird. It actually swapped the Zoom meeting for the host only, which was weird.
Oh, weird.
Anyways, yeah. Sorry about that. Hey, thank you for the subscription, especially after that fiasco.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
It's just like encouraging bad behavior at this point, right?
Right? Yeah, 100%.
Crash more, crash more.
Apparently, I got to. No, thank you for the Prime subscription. That really helps us out for anybody that can offer those opportunities for us. Yeah. So talking about terrain, and then we completely derailed because my internet
Hey,
decided to croak.
that's how my mind works most of the time, anyways. Is it just it reaches the end of the track and just kind of plummets down into the ravine, and then it's like, what were we doing? You know?
Oh, you and I are
Yeah,
alike,
yeah.
apparently.
The scary thought.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
All right.
So
Yeah, terrain.
terrain. But what we're gonna do is because that trail has completely lost my brain at this point. Um, you're gonna go to your normal questions
Man, okay.
so that we
So
can get our brains back on track after that.
yeah. So I've got like one or two questions that I've been asking. And I know this is going to be maybe a little bit difficult for you because you're so fresh, but we're going to go with it anyway. What has been a your highest high as either a player or a GM, and what's been your lowest low?
Love that. That's a good question. I think my highest high as a dungeon master is, I was clear with my players of like, this is all collaborative storytelling. I kind of wrote the bones for the world, but then as they created their players, we found ways to tie them in. And like the world has been drastically changed by the choices they've made and they've kind of influenced and stuff. And it was probably 10, 15 sessions ago now. But we reached a point where all of my players at the table started like arguing and debating about a piece of lore, and I just got to like sit back in my seat and just for like 10, 15 minutes my players were just like talking about theories and lore and all these things in the world that we're all part of, and like this is the coolest thing ever. That was very gratifying to know that like the time that I'm putting in is being poured right back in by them. We're all as invested into the world as anybody else is. That was very gratifying to see. It was very like you know uh, very uplifting, to see that the players are, not that I doubt that they're paying attention at any point in time, but when they're flipping back through pages of notes and they're like, no, this was actually true, or it was really cool. Um, yeah, so that'd be a high. I think for a low, frankly, the lows haven't been that low. It's a really good group of guys, but early on, kind of before I started DMing, mostly we just had some like turbulent waters of trying to figure out where our campaigns were going and where they're going to end because of people moving and shifts in life of people having kids and all that stuff. So it kind of felt like hey, we just got started, now it's all crashing down. Is probably the low, which frankly isn't that big of a low because it's like at the end of the day it's all for fun. It's a game that we all get to sit down and play. And I say often, it's like there's very few times that, like, I often play on Friday nights. It's like there's very few times I could sit around a table with a bunch of other adults and get to use silly voices and roll dice and do crazy things. um for me, D&D has just been all positive. Honestly, it has brought so much joy, so many hobbies that I now get to do, between actually running games, like recording podcasts with story crafters and crafting terrain and painting minis and writing and all this stuff. It's just been awesome to have been able to be kind of drawn into the space and leave a tiny little smudge of a fingerprint on it myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, if your lowest low is because you can't play due to life happening, I mean,
Oh darn!
I think you're doing pretty good.
I think you're doing really
Right.
good.
Yeah, you're doing pretty
it's
good.
definitely like a first world problem. Thankful. I'm who knows what the
Push
future
fingers.
holds. I'm sure there'll be something
Knocking all
else,
the
but
wood cupboards behind you.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly right. But no, I really have found a great group of friends that truly has blossomed because of D&D, which I think is really cool. We were all connected in some form or fashion distantly before, but now it's like, we have a reason to all come together and be in each other's lives, and that's really cool.
Yeah, one of the coolest
Okay.
things I've realized with Dungeons and Dragons is the fact that this isn't a one man show. Like, you can't. If you're gonna do that, you might as well go read a book. So
Right.
for this is so built around the idea of collaboration, right? There is no option. There is no option, um, and I've seen it so many different ways. Some that I've made friends for a lifetime because of, um, and you're right. Once you have a really good group, it's so fun because everybody's involved, everybody's excited, and everybody's willing to tell that same story, which is the best part about it. Welcome, heroes. Um, there's another big crafter right there. Heroes of Evermore, big crafter
For sure.
out in
Yeah.
California. Um, so I've been doing something over the last, you know, what, less than a month at this point. Um, and I have a set of 8 questions. Since our audience is a little quiet tonight, so if you have questions, please drop those in the comments, and
I've still got one more.
out there. Oh, you do have one more. All right,
I've still got one more before you go to the table.
that's fine.
Okay. Now I gotta refocus. Okay, this is what it was. God damn it. So while you've been GMing, since it is still relatively fresh in the grand scheme of things, of all things
Right.
D&D and whatnot, what kind of tips or tricks have you picked up along the way to keep your players interested?
That's a good one. I think my group really enjoys combat, so I found to at least like present the opportunity of combat in every session helps. We've had a few longer stretches just like in the midst of one session where it's not even necessarily a shopping episode as much as we're just kind of wandering through a town, and then I think attention start to go, mine included. um, I think that having a lot of different strands that you can pull on from characters' backstories and finding ways that everybody is interconnected is so important to have player buy-in, because just like James was just saying, it is collaborative storytelling. Like that to me is the whole point of it. We were talking about the older generation or people who've been playing D&D for years and years is more of a war gamer mentality. And I appreciate that. And, I enjoy combat in it as much as the next guy. But I think it's, being able to progress the story like that really does require the buy-in from everybody and giving your players agency to be able to impact things. I've played at a couple tables or a couple games where it's very much, all right, we're on a railroad. Clearly, whatever we're doing, we're still going in this direction, and that to me does not make good D&D. You need to have player agency so that they can affect the story, give them reasons to want to pay attention and to buy in. And to me, that's worked quite well. But
I think in a large and I am going to be one of the few that are going to say this because I do believe yes and no on the idea of the railroad. Some of our favorite stories were written in a railroad.
yeah,
Your favorite book is written in a railroad. You're right. Like,
yeah,
take the ring to the mountain, do it. Now, what the cool thing is, what people don't realize is yes, it was a railroad. How they got there wasn't written though. So,
right.
is it really a railroad? Is the question at that point. When you give a player agency, sometimes giving too much agency can actually be a danger as well because then you have
I
cats.
agree.
Then you're dealing with
Yes.
cats.
And I agree. And I think, I don't know what the proper terminology for it would be. I think I found that especially true in one shots because sometimes we'll do what I just kind of call like a palate cleanser.
Mhm.
I'm like, hey, we just need a break or whatever. Let's just do a one shot, that's absurd or random or completely different, whatever. And I found if it's not railroading, it's definitely like casting guidance, where it's just like,
Yeah.
just kind of nudge or have something in place that's kind of like a fail safe of like, this is going to progress the story.
Mm.
I had a player death a few sessions ago, and then one player just kind of said like, hey, I'm ready to be done with this character. So we're going to have them sail off into the sunset and introduce a new character. And so I found with introducing new characters of like, I want to give you guys the time to, do your monologues, introduce the character, set the scene for who they are, but also probably a monster is going to be running in, after 5-10 minutes,
Right.
to make sure that we do keep the story going. So I actually agree with you. I think it's like the balance there, which is sometimes really hard to achieve. But I do think you have to have like fail safes to
Yeah.
worst case
So
keep things pushing forward, you know.
the way it was told when I've heard this before, because you have sandboxes and you have railroads. Um, Brendan Lee Mulligan has a third, which is whitewater rafting, and that's how I believe games play, because it's like
Yep.
you're going in a direction, but it can very quickly veer off for a moment, and then you bring them back
Yep.
onto the path. Um, and I think one of the here's an interesting question for you though, because you like to use a ton of terrain. How do you balance that out? Because you kind of have to railroad more often when you're using terrain because you only have so much terrain built.
Yeah, and that is true. And that is definitely a trap that I've been guilty of falling into. I think I've gotten better at it as now I'm more used to the terrain that I do have and
Mm,
understanding how it can work. I am just clear with the players at my table at any given time of like the terrain that's in front of you is going to be generally representative of what is happening, yes. But don't take everything always at face value. You know, if you walk into this room and there is one bookcase, one bed, one dresser, like you can still roll investigation. There might be more, or I might describe it as something different from what you are actively seeing in front
mm,
of you. And that's just fine, you know, because at first I was very much in that mindset of like, you know, panicking as the session's about to begin because it's like, oh man, you know, I need to have a shrine here and I don't have one made. What am I going to use for a shrine?
right.
You know, turns out perfectly fine just to say there's a shrine here, you
Yeah,
know.
there's a shrine there.
And again, I think it's, you know, player buy-in or whatever you want to call it, but just communicating clearly, I feel like has saved me from a lot of heartache and trouble, you know. Because it is easy to do. You know, you paint yourself into a corner sometimes by having that terrain
Right.
on a table. Um, and I've definitely been guilty of that too. But I found for me, it's worked fairly well as a balance of just like, it's not always going to be exactly what is physically on the table. This is just giving us an idea, kind of
Mm.
setting the scene. It's really fun to get to move little plastic minis around the table, you
Yeah.
know?
My kids did it for we played our first D&D game with my 6-year-old and my 11-year-old or 10-year-old last weekend together. I My 6-year-old and my 10-year-old don't get along ever.
That's
Ever.
true.
And he knows it.
That's very true.
And they played collaboratively the entire 2 hours, and I thought I was going to make 45 minutes. I was like, they're young, their attention span. Now, mind you, we had a lot of physical things that they could play around with, which helped a ton.
For
Um,
sure.
uh, I actually let them build their world as they were running. So
That's so cool.
we rolled a d4, and I pulled all my boxes of Dwarven Forge out, and every time they would roll a d4, and whatever they got the number, that was how many pieces they had to pick up to move the story along.
That's a good
Um,
idea.
and it was a neat
That's so fun.
opportunity. They came up with a really cool, cute story, and I didn't do anything crazy, of course. But one thing I've had recommended of for people who like to use terrain is at the end of your session, always ask where your players want to go next, and it saves you from having to
Yes,
worry about that fight.
for sure. I every single session, like unless it is blatantly obvious
Yeah,
how the next session is going to go, you know, if we're like a
we're in the
dragon
middle of a
lands in front of
dungeon.
you and
Guess what? We're
roars,
staying in the dungeon
right,
tonight.
right, yes, that is the best advice I could give to anybody using physical terrain, or honestly, even if you're not using physical terrain, because like, you know, I have the world all mapped out and, you know,
Yeah,
have tidbits here and there, but like I kind of want to know. So I always ask them of just like, hey, I will plan in multiple directions. So I don't want you to feel like just because what you're saying right now is what you have to be
right.
married to, but like 100%.
What's your
Just
general
ask your players,
direction? Where do you want
yeah,
to
give
go
me,
next?
yeah, what's your heading?
Yeah.
That way I know how to more specifically plan. And yes, that is fantastic advice.
Yeah, no, it's not my advice. It came from somebody completely else. Todd Putman, who does incredible
Yeah, yeah,
terrain
like,
pieces.
like goals.
Yeah, I mean, it took him. He's been on the show. I'm good friends with him down in Florida, and he literally ate ramen for an entire like 3 or 4 years so he could pay his house off, and now 10% of everything he makes goes to his terrain. And
That's awesome.
I mean, and we've seen everybody who knows the name knows what he built, and it's
Oh
incredible.
yeah,
It's three to
true. Like
four, 3 to 4 6 by or normal like cardboard tables put together, and it's just the entire thing's covered in terrain.
massive.
It's massive.
Yeah,
So
like truly work of art, incredible stuff.
yeah. Now, mind you, I've seen his storage unit set too, or his storage set too. You don't get.
I And that's, I mean, and that is like the downfall of physical terrain is there's no good way to store it. Like, trust me, I've watched, in fact, I think maybe even he has a video on YouTube about how he stores his terrain. And like, I've watched
It's
many.
tubs
There's
and
no
tubs
full,
of
yeah,
just stacked and. Ooh,
right.
yeah.
I once had somebody ask me like, where do you store all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't. It's just everywhere. Like my life is a mess. It's all over the place.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see people use the like the floating shelves for any of the cool looking pieces, and then otherwise they go in tubs. That's really
Exactly
how
right.
it
I have
is.
like I have one bookcase that kind of sits out by my game table,
Yeah,
and that gets the pretty things and my D&D books and all that, and the rest is
the
like
rest
away in
is
the
in tubs.
storage room
Yeah,
and in tubs or precariously placed stacked on something else that's like if you touch one thing, it's all coming down.
yeah.
But
The downfall with styrofoam is that like right like it's great because it's light, it's cheap. But the problem is that like normally with the styrofoam stuff, you have to build them outward a decent amount to have a piece that you can actually utilize. And sometimes that's difficult where something like 3D printed or Dwarven Forge or what are the Warlock, those types of tiles, they're
yeah,
mini, so you can build them out and then you can shove them right back into a box and put them away. So
right.
there's pluses and minuses. Not to mention your stuff is way cheaper than Dwarven Forge. Goodness gracious.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
Dwarven Forge is, again, I feel like they're like the gold standard of just like everybody who crafts terrain is kind of trying to like, you see a table full of Dwarven Forge stuff and you're like, yeah, I want to try to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
But I've seen
but
a
yeah,
lot of
it's you
people.
pay for it.
I've seen a lot of people though that have come up with some really cool dioramas and stuff that look very close to Dwarven Forge, and I'm like,
For sure.
how much did
For
you pay?
sure.
Like, yeah, I paid $25 for it, and I was like, it's like a 30,
But the
$300 table right there with John's
yeah,
on the table.
I know, but the
Yeah,
but the secret there is it's $30, but then it's like 100 hours. So
Right.
it's like
yeah,
you're gonna pay for it
yeah.
one way or
Either
the other.
you did the hundred
But
hours or they did the 100 hours. It's just depends
exactly
on
right.
who's doing the money,
Yeah,
who's paying for it.
exactly
So.
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I didn't even think about that part because it's like, yeah, I've got, I made this cool thing, but it's taken me 100 hours, or I bought this cool thing and I just paid the 100 hours that guy just did because I didn't have to
Right.
do it.
Yeah, I
um,
have two. They're for a commission that I unfortunately am not at liberty to talk about a bunch at the moment, but I've like for the past 2 months have been working on a big commission that's almost done. Uh, and it's one of those things where it's like it's been a blast. I've learned a
yeah,
lot doing it. I'm very excited to get to share it. But like my gosh, I initially was tracking my hours just out of sheer curiosity. And at a certain point I stopped because I'm like, I don't think I want to know
I don't
anymore.
think I want to know anymore.
Like it's just gonna be discouraging if I actually find out.
Right.
Yeah. Without mentioning who you're doing it for, can you say what it is?
Uh
Like,
so it's
and you can be extremely vague
probably
if you have to be.
I'll be extremely vague. It is two very large game table style, very interactive pieces of terrain
Oh,
that are
nice.
going to be shipped out and hopefully see a lot of action. But
Cool.
yeah, so coming soon. It's due like in a week, a little over a week, and I'm not sure if that's exactly when I'll get to share more details of it. But definitely, watch my page, World's
Watch the
Okayest Crafter,
Instagram.
for pictures of it. Because when the time comes, I will very happily, very
Heck
readily
yeah,
be
you
sharing a lot
deserve
of info
to.
about it. So it's
Really.
We have a question, and this is with terrain as well. Any tips for photographing terrain? Natural light, light box.
yeah. So I am still very much learning as I go. I do everything with my iPhone. I would love to get a nicer camera one day in hopes of upping my terrain game. Lighting I found is key, and I actually just use, well, here I can, I'll turn it off so I'm not shining it directly into the camera. I
Little
just have
halo.
like little desk lamps
Yeah.
that, you know, I put on my table, and it looks, looks terrible as it's happening. Um, but I found those are pretty handy. Mobile lighting that is adjustable, so you can get really low and light things from certain angles, I found is helpful. Um, if you're using an iPhone, portrait mode is really nice because then you can kind of get the extra depth in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky though. I still don't, every once in a while, I'll get a picture that turns out beautifully. And I'm like, man, I wish I knew what I did there.
I wish I would
you know? But
Shucks.
yeah, lighting is definitely key. There are people who are way more qualified than me. Um, but I found what kind of tends to work is, try to focus on something in the foreground and kind of let the background be what it is. Um, but yeah, for me, it is like 100% trial and error, which is true of my terrain crafting and everything. I just try things, and sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't.
Right. I find that same issue with the gunpla that I put together, like trying to get the right lighting and the right, like, all right, how am I gonna show this off in the right way? Yeah, it's a very similar issue that I'm coming across.
And yours,
For sure.
using the light box is probably going to be better for you, but you have to have the moving, like the lazy Susan, to spin it to get the angle that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Or I just manually do it and just smooth as I can.
Yeah. I've noticed, and this is something that I've seen over the last couple of years, especially for convention games, where people are using a lazy Susan as part of their terrain build, which is really neat.
Yeah, which I think is actually genius because then depending on who's playing, my players never do, but I always tell them like you can get up and walk around and like see from a different angle. My play area is 2 foot by 3 foot. That's like the space that my table fit in. So my table is what's that, 5 by 4 or 5 by 6, whatever. And so that's the space that I had available. And so which has helped me as a terrain crafter because then I have a defined area that I know, like, I'm not going to make something that doesn't fit in here because that's the defined space. But I think especially for flat tables or elevated, like if you can have something that rotates so everybody can see, from the correct angle without having to get up and move, I think that's genius.
Yeah. All right, James, do you want to use your table now?
We can. I don't know. I mean, we've been having some really good conversations. I mean, I can probably
That's
just
true.
go at a different question. What has been the hardest piece you've built so far? Minus the one that we can't talk about yet.
Yeah, I say that's the easy answer because it's just the scale and time in. That's a good question. I think so. I have some pieces that aren't quite finished that are just mine. In fact, they're right here. That were like they're like mushrooms. That were really fun, and it was a lot of trial and error. Like these are pipe cleaners covered in hot glue, and this is like EVA foam and stuff up top.
Nice.
Those were challenging because it was something entirely different for me. I feel like so often I default to like I know how XPS the blue foam is going to act and react. I know what I can do with it.
EVA.
Yeah, that's a great question though. It definitely works a little differently. It's a whole different ball game. That's interesting. I'm trying to think what else I've made, but
a lot of costume stuff. If you're looking for detail things, Warbler is another really good one. Gets shapes better.
That's what I've heard, and I've not gotten to work with it personally. But yeah, that's why I've looked into it, and I've almost grabbed some before. I think just some of the bigger pieces that I've done just innately are more challenging because of the scale. When you're trying to paint them, especially if you have a flat surface, it's sometimes challenging to like keep it interesting. Where I still oftentimes find I'm trying to keep a lot of my terrain more minimal so that it's more versatile. Like I have a taller, like 3-story ruined tower that has like Gothic windows and stuff. I got it after I got some jigs from Shifting Lands, mostly just because I wanted to play with the new jigs that I had. And like it turned out cool and, it worked well for what it was. But I look at it now and it's like, I wish I would have just added the extra detail to make it fit that setting better. But then it makes it harder for the other settings. So again, it's kind of like threading the needle there, of do you go overboard and add the extra details, like adding skulls or posters. A lot of people like in Mordheim and stuff will add the posters.
Yeah.
And it's like I've made some ruined buildings and I thought about adding those, but then it's like, well, does that add enough character but take away versatility? And the answer is probably not really, because you could just say like those posters aren't really there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of
Or you
the
make them like so you can move the posters and things like that.
right. And that's one thing I've played with magnets some, and I don't enjoy
Magnets
it.
are neat though. Like, you can do some really cool things with it. The downfall is they're a lot of times, like you said, they're 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 finicky sometimes, or they don't work
Very
properly.
finicky.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah. Let's yeah. If we don't have any other questions coming into the chat room, let's roll the dice for the night. I've got a D8, so if you want to roll me a D8,
Yeah.
Garrett,
Give me a
we'll
second.
see what we got here.
Let me see. This is how prepared I am. I don't even have dice in front of me, so I'm opening D&D Beyond to roll, which is going to
I
work
have
perfectly fine.
D4s
But
on me, but I don't have my
here we
D8
go.
handy.
I gotcha. That is a 3.
3. Ooh, this one might be a hard question for you, but we'll see. Because you're newer to the system, or you're newer to the gaming, TTRPGs in general. It says, what are aspects of TTRPGs that you've taken from another system and used in your own?
Ooh, that is interesting. Um, there's some, so I use, what is it called? It's called Captains and Cannons, is
Ooh,
like
I've
the
heard
third
of
party
that.
supplement that I found and I've used, and it is made for 5e,
Mm-hmm.
but I found that and I can't remember the name of the other one. It was something that was not made for D&D. It was for another like tabletop ship to ship combat thing, and I can't remember the name of it.
So
But
let me ask you
anyway,
that question then. The one that you're
yeah.
talking about, the captains and cannons, what are
Uh-huh.
what is something you use from there that you use in your game that maybe is
So
not something other people knew about?
yeah, so I came across it before I purchased Ghost of Saltmarsh, actually.
Oh
So
wow.
I actually used yeah, I know, which like how, who knows, but whatever.
We don't
But
question
yeah,
it.
so I actually use the full ship stat blocks from that. They um have, loadouts, carry capacity, speed, damage threshold,
Oh,
which
they
was an
decked it
interesting
out.
thing where
Okay.
they decked it out full on. And it's a little clunky, which is why I kind of supplemented from a few things. And we found what works reasonably well. I still feel like ship to ship combat is a little bit clunky because you kind of get into like you have your player actions and your ship actions and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worked well enough for my table. I think like it's what we've adopted, so it's kind of what we're using now.
Yeah.
If in 5 years I were to do another seafaring campaign or a stint on the open ocean or whatever, I might look into other rule sets and adopt something else just to see what there is. But I personally am very open to adapting. The way I play D&D is probably a little bit of an abomination or Frankenstein. For if a purist were to sit down at my table, they might be offended.
I really don't think
Um,
anymore that there is such thing as a purist Dungeons and Dragons player or game master.
and I don't and I don't think so either, because there's so many play systems and so many games that are like in the same vein that people just kind of take things and run with it. And
Yeah.
that, again, I think I already said that, to me is the beauty of it, is you use what works for you and you toss what doesn't. And you know if it works, it works.
No, I agree. Um, I'm really curious. What is one of your favorite? I would say moments, but like, what is your one of your favorite moments as a storyteller that you've come to see at the table yet so far?
So it was the same player whose character actually met an untimely death recently, but his whole story arc basically came to a conclusion.
Oh, that's
He was a
awesome.
rogue, had a very traditional like rogue background, worked as an assassin for his mentor who, cast him out on the street, beat him within an inch of his life. And so the big bad of this story, his name is Malachor Darktide, and he's this giant pirate tyrant guy. And so I was able to take this player's backstory and tie it into the world where he was part of this thing called the Spiders Guild, and tie it in so that all the major moving pieces all tied together, where his former mentor was actually hired by this person who was actually working with the big bad. And so then it gave everybody else kind of, reason to also hate this guy beyond just, this guy's our friend or he's in our party, so we'll help you fight him. Um, that to me was a beautiful moment where they were in a big city and the city fell under siege. There were so many moving parts that like the second that it actually like we all got to pull it off was like that was really like it was one of the moments where I wish I would have recorded the D&D session just so I could watch it back, because like my players were flawless through it. It was such a beautiful thing because it was, again, like I kind of laid the groundwork of the world, but 90% of it was from my players' influence and from the story points that they brought in from their characters that I was able to, weave into the story. And it was such a beautiful moment for me that, like
Yeah.
I wasn't brought to tears, but man, if there was a moment, that was the one that I was pretty darn close. And that was really to the point that that player, we sat and talked like till 2 a.m. about what just like unfolded.
Those are good
And we're like
moments.
getting emotional and talking about like, his character was named Marion, talking about this character as if he was a real person, that we're super attached to and all these things. And it's like, man, which we talked about when his character then met his untimely fate of, it was like 30 sessions, 30 times that we'd seen this character, and we're like, do the math. And it's like, man, that's a couple hundred hours, depending on how long we're playing each time. And it's like, it's like a TV character at a certain point. So that to me was the coolest moment that, even if the campaign ended early and ended today, I would still look back and be brought so much joy by what we were able to do collaboratively. Telling that story was so beautiful. Like I could not have, put pen to paper myself and come up with the story and had it unfold the way that it did. And that to me is the beauty of D&D. That's why we roll the dice. That's why you don't sit and play D&D alone. That's why you have other people. That to me was the coolest moment so far, at least of the campaign. So
Hey, I mean that sounds like a great moment, and it sounds like the culmination of so many things coming together, which definitely will be something you'll talk about for a long time. Thank you, Tales of the Mentor, for stopping by. We'll hopefully see you guys next week. And yeah, that's I want to keep talking, but I feel like this is a perfect time to close it out, because that is the reason we do this, right? We do this because we want to tell a collaborative story. We don't want to do this on our own. And I mean, you said it perfectly. Looking for those moments is the reason we game master, right? It's not, we as game masters don't just do this for our own excitement and enjoyment. It's to watch the players take that investment that we so much enjoy doing ourselves and seeing something new and better come from it. And
yeah, exactly right.
Pretty awesome, I'm not gonna lie. And I hope more adventures look like that for you. Um, those are the moments that you will talk about for a long time. I still have players that I talk to that we talk more about the campaign we played than we actually talked about what we were doing in life at the time. So I understand that.
That's when you know it's good.
Yep. Chuck, you got any last questions?
No, like you said, I think this is a good stopping point. We've discussed a lot of good things. So yeah,
on a good note, like a really good note. And this was the best.
I'm sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like ending it.
No, yeah, this is
the
a good.
best way to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Real quick, Jared, let people know where they can find you. I'm gonna drop your little note back in the chat room.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah. So again, I'm Jared. I'm WorldsOkayestCrafter on any social media that you want to find me, and I'm reasonably active on some and pretty active on Instagram. So that's the main place. But yeah, look for me there. Look for the Story Crafters podcast that I do with some other awesome creators, including Charlie, the Inked GM. Nicole Game Master Mom, and Jeff Rogers, DM, who are all awesome people in this, D&D space. Charlie and Nicole both been on this show, so if you haven't watched those episodes, go back and watch those.
Definitely.
And Tavern talks with both of them. But yeah, that's me. Really appreciate it, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. We hope this part of our job is to make sure these are fun for you guys.
Yes.
It was a blast. I mean, listen, I think all of us could sit and if we could all sit down and just talk about D&D every night, I think we could all get over it and, if we had to twist a couple arms.
Yeah. You know how you do that? You subscribe and and do those things so that I can do this full time. That's how we do that.
Exactly right.
That's it.
Exactly right.
I wake up in the morning and there's 100 subscribers and I can retire from my job for a little while. This
exactly right.
But anyway,
that's awesome.
This has been a great time to talk. Your stuff is incredible looking. I literally
I really appreciate it
multiple times throughout the chat just to kind of be like, okay, what other ideas can I ask him, because these are amazing.
Really appreciate it.
Keep your craft up, keep showing pictures of, and you're gonna go pretty far. And I'm looking forward to finding out what this secret project is.
I know, me too.
Me too. And I hope it's something that launches you to the next level. So
I appreciate it.
This is Last Call, everybody. This is Tavern Talks. Thank you all for hanging out with us tonight. Real quick, we're going to shout out to our sponsors who we love and we treat with such care. First off, it's Monument Studios. The music that you're hearing tonight, along with any music that you hear on Tabletop Misfits over this next year, will definitely be sponsored by them. If you're looking for new sets of Click Clacks, 15% off. Use Misfit15 over at CanadianDice.ca. And looking for apparel, you can get both Beaker and I's stuff on your shirts and your hats and your cups. Go over to DungeonGrandmaster.com. Yeah, he's got a really cool icon over there.
For sure, that thing's sick. Every time you pop up, your image got bigger. I'm taking in more detail. I didn't notice the paintbrush and the clippers. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, baby.
And stay tuned, because the Misfits are changing. If you've noticed
For the better.
If you noticed and you haven't popped into Discord, come hang out with us. You'll notice that our name has changed slightly as we start to develop into a new brand completely. But you aren't going to lose either of our faces. We're still going to be here every week on Wednesday nights and Thursday nights, and soon Sunday nights. So as the new show drops later this month for episode 1 of the Myths of Moria. So
it's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun.
I'm not involved in any way. Tune in, because it's Lord of the Rings and you can't go wrong.
Yeah. And not only is it Lord of the Rings, it is the official Lord of the Rings TTRPG. So it's going to be gruesome, it's going to be dark, and it's going to be fun. Anyway,
can we say the other thing that comes out at the end of the month? The cast call?
Oh yeah, if you want to mention it real fast before we closed out. Another casting call is coming out for
so I'm putting out another game. So we got a cast call coming out at the end of the month for Power Rangers TTRPG that I'll be running in the summer, towards the end of the summer, and kind of overlapping a little bit with the One Ring. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that. That's gonna be fun too.
That's gonna be fun too. That comes out later this year. So we've got Lord of the Rings, we've got Power Rangers, we've got Icewind Dale on Monday nights, and we have Tavern Talks and Beaker Builds. We've got a lot of stuff going on over here, and the way you can help us is to like, share, and comment on all this stuff, all the socials. It's free. It helps us out a ton. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your gaming groups. And hopefully we'll see you guys all next week. Have a wonderful night. Tomorrow night. Yes, tomorrow night. Also, stick around if you would, real quick, as we raid some friends.